So you've heard about Bitcoin and it works with blockchain, but do you know about Ethereum? And have you considered decentralization? How about DAOs in your data, DeFi, open source software, crypto Twitter, E2.0, Mt. Gox stacks, sidechains, state channels, consensus mechanisms? Welcome to Square One, a place to deepen your crypto knowledge. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Square One podcast. I'm here with Stani, the founder and CEO of Aave, and I'm really excited to kind of dig into his experience within this industry as well as his perspective around DeFi. This is one of the first DeFi episodes, so yeah, would love to get your insights on sort of what that means for people who maybe aren't as familiar with the crypto industry, Stani. But maybe just to begin, I'm curious to learn a little bit more about yourself and for our listeners. Could you tell us like where you are and also what brought you into crypto? What was that journey like for you?
Sure. My probably first touching base with crypto was in 2000. I think was it 2015 roughly. Given I would say 2014 when my friend did. I used to study law, so with academic background. I'm actually a lawyer, but before that I basically build applications and still build software in decentralized finance. But back then my friend was doing actually this kind of like a thesis about the taxation of Bitcoin and how it works in Finland, where I come from originally. That is where I got into know Bitcoin cryptocurrencies at the first time, but I didn't pretty much like go beyond that. Like it wasn't so interesting to me yet. And at some point I got more interested in practically contracts. So as I was studying law, and I was thinking like how we could make contracts more efficient and what kind of how we could use technology there. One of the things I was researching a bit is and stumbled upon was smart contracts and Ethereum. And what happened is that I understood that with smart contracts you could actually create a set of agreements where you don't have to rely on the counterparty, but those contracts will execute by themselves. So instead of going to court, the contract resolves by itself. And because of the nature of the blockchain and Ethereum as a ledger, when you deploy some sort of a piece of code or transactions, they are immutable unless you create some sort of ways to actually update the code via governance or whatnot. That was very powerful idea to me, and that was 2016. In 2017 we pretty much started to experiment a bit to create some sort of financial application, and we wanted to create a loan lending protocol, in the sense that where you could actually lend out funds, get return in terms of interest rate, and on the other side you could actually borrow funds and by placing some other cryptographic asset as a collateral. This kind of like created the whole over collateralization system, what we use widely in decentralized finance. And that particular project name was ETH short for Ethereum lending. And things started from there. So it was a few years ago, and DeFi wasn't even coined back then. It was very small activity.
That's crazy. And so that was in like 2017, you said? Was that like a hackathon or something, right?
Yeah, 2017, it wasn't even a hackathon. So we just wanted to build something, and like something where we could actually prove the power of smart contracts and power immutability and in finance. Because traditionally when you look at, let's say, blockchain and let's say Bitcoin, you see one type of transactioning. So it's sending funds from one place to another, multi-signature wallets where you could actually have some sort of restrictions on how transactioning happens. And then with Ethereum, what happened was that you could actually do pretty much anything, because you now have this kind of like an operating system running virtually in the blockchain and can execute different kinds of tasks and code when you call those functions of a smart contract. And we kind of understood that this project that we created wasn't a startup. It wasn't anything. It was just a small thing we wanted to try. And then the community just started to come around the project, and we decided to continue.
I love that. That's super cool. So I mean, there's a few threads that I would love to dig into there more. And so you were a lawyer by trade, but you also were a software developer as well. Was that something that you had also just picked up as a hobby, kind of?
Yeah, I guess in our family it's been always that way. So
Mm.
since I got my first computer in 1998, I've been pretty much like experimenting things. I remember like it mainly influenced by my older brother, who was very into operating systems, especially into Linux and hardware and just tweaking things. I remember one particular event where we wanted to create a server just to play Counter Strike, and have a kind of like a hosted server. We didn't know where to place the server, so we basically created the server inside of our vacuum cleaner, and and basically put it there, all the hardware, and run the Linux there. And this is just an example like how technology has been always part of our household. And I think like I got at some point more excited about Ruby on Rails. This was the early days, for example, when Twitter was on Ruby Rails. And then I started at 18. I started to build fintech applications, and that fintech for me is pretty much like evolving the user experiences and like kind of like creating products in the user front end practically. But what DeFi is doing now is reshaping the finance backbone, the actual infrastructure, and making that more efficient. So in one way, I think this is some sort of a natural continuation of what I've been doing previously, and just moving more into improving the back end of finance.
That's interesting. I didn't realize that you were into. I mean, it makes sense, but I didn't recognize that like fintech was something that you were into prior to crypto. Um, I guess I would love to hear why was lending the first thing that you wanted to create via smart contracts? Why was that the obvious kind of first step? I guess.
I guess like there was already like trading kind of like trading protocols or like decentralized exchanges. Ether Delta was in particular already out there, and in Ether Delta, Zach was already working on ETH options, so that was kind of like covered. And then the kind of next natural step when you already have issuance of assets and you have the trading environment is actually being able to just borrow those assets, and or use them as a collateral and borrow something else. And it was more natural to create this kind of protocol where you could have interest rates on chain. So not just hold those assets, but also you would be able to deposit and earn yield. And I think that was kind of like a natural step. And lending by itself, lending market, whether it's traditional finance, in overall like debt, bonds, and so forth, it's quite wide market in the sense that I mean any asset that is traded frequently in traditional finance currencies, there is a big lending market there. And I thought about that actually that's something that we need to facilitate, and we need to have on chain, and we can do that with smart contracts. And I guess like when we started, the system was pretty simple. I mean, it was more of a peer-to-peer interactions. Now the models at Aave, for example, is more pooled. So you have pooled liquidity, which practically means that as a depositor, you can just deposit funds and you earn. You can withdraw at any time you want. There's always reserve. And then as a borrower, you can just come with a collateral and borrow whatever you want to and pay interest. So this kind of like creates very efficient market. And today the whole Aave protocol market size is above 10 billion. So it's really grown quite substantially now.
Yeah, I mean it's super cool, and I think the thing too that I love about Aave most, is also like most impressive, and also a testament to the space, is the way that it has come to fruition. Where there's only a few, I guess, there's a few dominant, fully decentralized DeFi protocols, in my opinion. Right? There's like on the exchange side, there's Uniswap and Balancer, and then a handful of others. And then on the lending side, it's really, to me, it's just Aave and Compound, more or less. Is there anyone else there? And then I would love to dig into like the distinctions between Aave and Compound, because, and also hear about how the community that was inspired by ETH Lend formed, because that's such a, to me, that the real art of like creating a successful crypto protocol is facilitating that community. And I think the playbook there is like continuing to be written by different projects in a variety of ways.
Yeah, I guess like what's cool about decentralized finance in general is that like all the contracts are open in the sense that anyone can just look at the code that is in Aave, Compound, or let's say other protocols, and just kind of like improve and make better protocols, which is kind of nice because then you have this kind of like a constant innovation, and the industry isn't relying upon kind of like a modes and inefficiencies, but actually like there's all the time this urge to improve things. And of course like it might saturate the market a bit when there is so many protocols improving, like basically improving what already exists. But eventually it's kind of like about brand as well. So when you create a new version of protocol and a new one, and you have this kind of like a expectation as a team and as a wider community that the product is constantly improved, it gets this kind of like a brand value, like a brand community value. And because of this, I think like we will see more lending protocols in the future, more innovation, but liquidity will also move quite easily between the protocols. So essentially, decentralized finance is a marketplace between liquidity and algorithms, and anyone can create those algorithms. Any part of the world, anyone can actually build the next Aave. In terms of how we differentiate, I think all of the protocols, whether it's lending or swap protocols, they are kind of selling pretty much risk assessment as a community. So pretty much we have a different kind of way of assessing risk, how different assets are listed into the protocol via the governance mechanisms, and pretty much like what kind of risk parameters are used. And that is how like mostly we differentiate. And of course, like Aave is a protocol, which means that there's not just one particular market, but we also have other markets. For example, we have so-called AMM market, where you can use Uniswap, Balancer, liquidity provider tokens as a collateral and borrow against them. And later SushiSwap and Curve will be added if the community decides so. So those are kind of like I would say like maybe like strategically different, but also I would say that we have quite advanced features in the sense that when you deposit into the Aave protocol, you actually can swap your deposit within the protocol. So let's say you deposit a stable coin, let's say USDC, you can swap USDC into let's say DAI if the rates is higher, or you can also swap your collateral if that's if you already borrowed against your collateral, you could swap your collateral as well. So there's sort of like advanced features there which actually make the user experience more easier. You can also repay your loan with your collateral. So those small things, they are really powerful, especially when you're trying to kind of like improve the user experience. And we have received a lot of good feedback from that. But all of these protocols that are in like heavily used in DeFi are very good.
Right. No, absolutely. Um, and yeah, I think, well, or I guess like briefly, what is I know that there's an actual contract layer nuance in the way that interest is calculated, I think, between Aave and Compound. Is that the primary kind of differentiating factor between the two protocols, aside from the community and the team and the actual like interface and products that are being developed around them?
Yeah, I would say there's different kinds of interest rates mechanisms. So I would say Aave has similar interest rate mechanism to compound, for example, where you have variable rates and they're based on utilization ratios. But also what we have innovated is so-called stable rate, where actually you can get a rate that doesn't change. Basically, it's guaranteed for you for except a couple of edge case scenarios. So let's say that you might want to have stability over how much interest you pay. So you want to have more control and avoid fluctuation on the interest rate. So you can take so-called stable rate, and that rate is guaranteed to you. And that rate is perpetual. The only condition that rate can change is practically whether two conditions are met. So the utilization ratio across the whole protocol is 95%, so almost full utilization, and the interest rate will be above 25%. So it's kind of like a condition if that there's full liquidity squeeze, and in that case, the position can be rebalanced to new market stable rate. It's kind of something in between like what Maker has in the stability fee, but it's more algorithmic in that sense. It's been quite popular. I think half of the loans are actually on stable rates at the moment, and that's showcases that actually the consumers they want, or the users they want stability and control over what they're paying.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, and I think to me that's having more stable interest rates would be a result of like maturation within the industry, because today you see DeFi summer was really epic in a lot of ways as far as like exciting 1,000% interest rates for like days or weeks at a time, right? But they weren't consistent. You couldn't properly rely on them. It was more of that's where the degen like culture, the apes or whatever came in and are able the crypto savvy or crypto native are able to capitalize on that. But for those who just want a stable interest rate, who maybe want to park their capital somewhere, these kinds of stable opportunities are going to be more and more important. I think something else that I'm really curious about your perspective. Well, I think there's two things. I guess like on a broader level, what do you feel like is how do you define a successful token economy? One, and then on another, like to take that further, what do you feel like the future value these new digital financial systems will create for the globe as society, right? I think that but we can go into this like blue sky sort of exploration.
Yeah, I would say like the fascinating part about token economics is that there's like two things. There's the distribution and what it allows you to do. So what's, for example, now happening in the Aave protocol, you basically can become a stakeholder in Aave in a couple of interesting ways. One way is that you obtain Aave and then you stake your Aave into the so-called safety module, and you receive more Aave over a period of time, practically when you are backstopping the protocol of some different kinds of vulnerabilities that might happen or failed liquidations. So kind of like you're backing the solvency of the protocol by staking your Aave. The other one is that you are using Aave, so the Aave protocol. So you are providing liquidity or you're borrowing, and what this provides is that as you provide liquidity, you get more rewards in Aave, which means that you become a stakeholder in the Aave governance. So with the Aave token, you are practically voting on how the protocol will be evolving in the future, what kind of risk parameters, assets could be listed. And substantial, what this means is that these protocols eventually become not just like community owned, but also like user owned. So imagine the same thing as you're taking the Uber or you're taking food delivery, and each and every single thing that you are buying, every product creates ownership for you and a stake of that particular entity. And that's like the coolest thing, because it takes more power from the from centralized stakeholders and distributes based on the user base. And I think that's valuable, especially like if you look at the financial system today, it's definitely like concentrated, but these decentralized protocols and this open system where you can build anything in DeFi, and the innovation is so fast that it's very difficult to create anything alternative, but just to join the movement and improve the improve finance. What makes actually a lot of sense for traditional finance is actually join and help building these protocols, because the more they build and consume, the more governance power everyone is receiving. And that's a big substantial difference in when we are looking into like how these protocols and mission critical infrastructure will be owned in the future.
Right. I think that's very powerful, and it's also something that will continue to unfold. And everyone is there's a variety of strategies for distributing that power based on participation, and in some ways those decisions, I mean, they're not completely arbitrary, but they are kind of estimates more or less on how to fairly distribute. Like the idea of the fair launch initially was like, oh, okay, this is now a fair way to distribute tokens, which was really innovative earlier this or like late 2020. But then at the end of the day, that requires like quite a bit of liquidity. So you're still there's different levels of access, I guess, that people who are participating within these networks are able to assume ownership of. But I think that is fundamentally the thing that is like extremely valuable. I will say I've had like some conversations with friends who are very concerned about like the environmental impact of proof of work chains and things. And I know Ethereum's moving to proof of stake, but even if say it wasn't, their argument is that the entire financial system today, or the blockchain ecosystem today, is consuming something like 6x the amount of energy the entire financial system consumes today. And I personally have the intuition that the efficiency gains that will ultimately result from these global, immutable and sort of composable and fully accessible financial products should outweigh whatever those energy that energy consumption that is required. But I think it's also kind of a hard thing to prove in just like a conversation sort of. I guess, yeah. I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, because I would say it's very difficult to assess like what's the kind of like a energy uses maybe in traditional finance, like what's the total consumption, and but I would say like the proof of work, definitely like you're using electricity, like what you could do, you could replace the sources of the electricity, but end of the day we're moving into an kind of like a solution where we're using proof of stake for something as Ethereum, where most of the kind of like would say like a DeFi in the short mid term period will be. So that will solve quite a lot. So it's kind of like the blockchain itself and DeFi isn't like an environmentally unfriendly. I would say it's more about the actually the proof of work. But I also would say that if you look at like how traditional finance works and how much infrastructure has been built, just the personnel, just the amount of people you need, just the amount of service you need to run everything. It's actually quite burdensome infrastructure. I mean, if you look at London, where I these days stay in Canary Wharf, that's basically whole finance sector there that has to operate ongoing basis. So it's kind of like, I would say that getting environmentally friendly and carbon neutral is something we need to achieve everywhere. And I think for the biggest step for DeFi will be the moving to proof of stake, which actually we are doing in one of the Aave markets, which is actually in Matic, today called Polygon. So there's already 1.3 billion worth of market size there, and that's practically with proof of stake. So that's a good example if you want to use proof of stake, you could use Matic, and actually the transaction costs are a fraction of a cent. So it's quite interesting experience.
Epic. That's so exciting. I can't wait for layer 2 apps to kind of start taking off, because it's a long time coming. Like we need it to happen, you know. Epic. Well, Stani, do you have any, just before we get off, do you have anything that's coming around the corner that you're particularly excited about in DeFi?
In the Aave ecosystem, I would say that currently there was the liquidity mining proposal which kickstarted off, and which is very interesting for integrators that are building on top of Aave or want basically governance power in the ecosystem, in the Aave protocol governance. But now we see that there is actually a proposal as well for Aave Grants DAO, which practically means that there's going to be a separate DAO for grants, which practically will get requests funds from the main DAO and funds different kinds of projects. So that is something we're working upon currently, and of course like a new version of the Aave protocol as well, and of course cross-chain deployments. So it's going to be very, very busy next 6 months, I would say.
Absolutely, and you're a busy guy. I don't know how many times we've tried to we've had to reschedule this chat. So I'm really glad that you had the chance to sit down with me for a bit, and you know take some time, because I know that you have hundreds and hundreds of things to get done. So, but yeah, man, it's been great to chat briefly. I appreciate you coming on.
It was very exciting, and thanks so much for having me here, James.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
If you want to explore more and deepen your understanding of cryptocurrency concepts and mechanisms available today, please visit our Gitbook or Crypto Encyclopedia. You can find it on our website at square1.tech. Thanks for listening.